represent His Excellency the President, Dr. Emerson Mnangagwa, who sent me to represent him in person. And
mutevedzeri wemutungamiriri wenyika Dr. Constantino Chiwenga vachitaura mushure mekupinda mhemberero dzekugadzwa zviri pamutemo kwemutungamiriri wenyika yeUganda vaYoweri Museveni avo vakasarudzwa musarudzo dzakaitwa mumwedzi waNdira. Sarudzo dzinova dzakavavo nekutaurika kuti dzakanga dzisina kufambiswa zvakanaka. Asi Vice President panapa vanonzwika vachitaura maererano nerwendo rwavo vachiti vaenda kuUganda vachindomiririra mutungamiriri wenyika vaEmerson Mnangagwa. Izvi zvateveravo mibvunzo yanga iri kubvunzwa nevamwe vanhu vakawanda padandemutande kuti kosei Vice President vaenda kuUganda panguva ino iri kuratidza kuti zvinhu hazvina kumira zvakanaka munyika. Pane kupisa, vanhu vakawanda vane kutyira kana kuti vane kuspekuleta kwekuti vanogona kukuduburwa, vanogona kurongerwa mukufamba imomo. Asi panapa vari kutaura kuivo kuti vafamba sehurumende uye vachitumwa nemutungamiriri wenyika. vaYoweri Museveni vatungamirira nyika yeUganda kwemakore anodarika ivo 40 years, kureva kuti 4 decades vachitungamirira nyika yeUganda, uko kunoramba kuchichemwa nenyaya yekumbunyikidzwa kwekodzero dzeveruzhinji.
Represent His Excellency the President, Dr. Emerson Mnangagwa, who sent me to represent him in person and to represent our country for the inauguration of President Yoweri Museveni, his 7th term here in Kampala. We do go to member states of the AU when they have such ceremonies, like especially inauguration after the elections, to see the level of advancement a country would have achieved, and as we would have achieved as African countries. Because remember, we had our the AU from OAU has been developing since 1963 when it was formed. And then when it was formed, it had only very few countries that were independent from the colonial masters. By then, some were former colonies of the French, some were Spaniards, some were German, some were Britain, like in our case, some were Portuguese. So the African countries came together to form the Organization of African Unity, which later translated into the AU. And each period of time, they gave themselves objectives to meet, principles to meet. And this is what we also learn as Zimbabwe, to see what other countries have achieved, and to learn from the way they might have done their things, and then do better at home. For instance, you might recall that way back in the 60s, Africa declared that the entire African continent had to be independent, had to be liberated. Those were the main objectives until the liberation of the last country on the continent, South Africa. Thereafter, we were now giving ourselves objectives to meet for our development. For instance, in 1981, there was the Bantu Declaration, which was done in the Gambia on the human rights, on corporate governance, and so, African countries, the 54, as we are, they wanted to see, we wanted to see how we are achieving that objective. Later on, the African heads of states again sat down and gave themselves the way they should govern themselves by way of having elections. And that declaration was done in Nairobi, in Addis Ababa, 1987. Was it 2007? Not 87, 2007. So these things would have been discussed at various levels by the officials until it gets to the heads of states. So they agreed on the election and how we should, how we should develop our own democracy as African countries. Then 2013, which is known by everyone, then the African heads of states came up with the Agenda 2063 to say, how should Africa be like? Of course, majority of us will not be there, but these are set objectives that whoever comes in will say, what do we want Africa to be like in 2063, the agenda. So by coming here now to see what has happened and their inauguration, which we are going to see pretty soon, we are learning on how the different parts of our continent are developing in terms of their democracy. Last year, we're in Tanzania, and the previous year we're in Nigeria, to see how they were doing so. And also we do send our electoral commissions to the various countries as they hold their elections to see how they do and where we can learn ourselves and how we can do better. And so that's why I'm here. So there are quite a number of countries, heads of states, some represented at my level, some at prime minister, some have sent their delegations at ministerial level, to come to see how far Uganda is going.